All right. So here we are with another episode of, a review of an Orville episode. So without much ado, this episode is called, um, it is called, um, here, sorry, it's called If the Stars Should Appear. So basically, this episode focuses primarily on the Orville crew um, seeing a derelict spaceship and them being like, well, this is kind of weird. Eventually, they come to the conclusion that this derelict spaceship is kind of like, what the hell's going on here? And what they discover is that this derelict spaceship is in fact um, a world ship. Basically, it like has its own valleys and stuff. Um, and it's on a collision course to a star in 6 months. Um, Everyone on the ship's going to die. Here's the irony though. No one on the ship realizes that, as a matter of fact, they're on a ship. They think this is their world. There's a group of religious fundamentalists who believe that any form of questioning the reality that they're in is false. So you have the crew of the Orville who are like, look, we need to let these people know that their ship is going to die, that everyone on the ship is going to die, the ship's going to be destroyed. And you have a group of people who are so ignorant they don't realize that, as a matter of fact, they are, um, you know, on a spaceship. They have no clue. Um, so essentially, that's the setting we're in, and it's fairly useful. What you learn from this episode is that, essentially speaking, a lot of messed up stuff is going on, and it's great character building. You learn more about Ed and his ex-wife's um, breakup, like how they feel about it, and they're frankly very philosophical about it, a maturing, if you will, of what's going on. So, um, and Alara, and this is a great team building episode, and it really shows just how badass it could be. Um, but the really cool thing is that about this episode is that it basically is a multi-layered episode. It essentially, I mean, it's standard sci-fi fare. These people don't realize that they're on a spaceship. But it's also like, oh snap, it makes a moral um, it makes a moral question, like a philosophical point where it's like the prison of belief, where you believe so strongly in something that may be false, that it keeps you from seeing other truths. Um, it's also a great character building episode where basically you see what happens. I mean, and there's some brutal torture. I mean, this poor woman gets the shit kicked out of her. I mean, she gets beaten like she gets beaten like somebody's. Uh, she gets beaten like she talked about somebody's mama. She's tortured. She's given a virus that's supposed to, cause intense amounts of pain. I mean, it's some jacked up shit in this episode. The quintessential torture episode that every Star Trek series has to have. That's just, you know, that's how you know you're in Star Trek. You gotta have a torture episode, and it's done relatively well. There are some laughs in it, but it is what it is. Um, so overall, one of the highlights of the episode is that the main character, um, a surprise character, is that Liam Neeson is the religious figure that the people who are kind of really caught up in this type of thing are essentially obsessed with, and essentially they essentially are, it turns out that Dural, the god that they worship, was the captain, and he's like, look, our ship has been damaged. If anyone sees this message, we have to fix it so that, something bad doesn't happen. And at the end of it, like the Union, which is basically a stand for the Federation, essentially come up and say, well, we got to help these people. We got to help these people relearn their reclaim their birthright as reclaim their birthright as a spacefaring civilization. It's actually a fairly deep episode, and I enjoyed it. Overall, it's one of the best episodes of the Orville we've seen thus far. And here's the thing: it's like a double whammy, because the last episode about a girl was really good. I'm like, well, how are they going to top that? But no, it's still very good. It's one of those things where it's like, well, damn, I can't believe that. So, yeah, I've been enjoying it. So let's talk about the next episode after the cut. Well, not the next episode, but episode 5, Priya, after the cut. Okay then, so this is the Orville episode 5 review. It's a double review, 4 and 5. Yes, I actually put them together. So basically, this episode is kind of interesting because essentially, it's, in my opinion, not quite as strong as 3 and 4, but I mean, it's still pretty damn good. And basically, the what happens in this episode is that essentially our main character, Ed, and the crew, they essentially discover, hey, we've got to essentially save the ship that's letting out a distress call. What they discover is that, well, this ship has one inhabitant, Captain Lavara. I forgot her last name, but she's played by Charlize Theron. And of course, obviously, this is where it's too good to be true. But anyway, Lavara essentially pretends like she's very interested in Ed Mercer, and she's very, into him. And he, in turn, shows her all over the ship, the Orville. And some strange things begin to happen on the ship. And Kelly, who is Ed's first officer, is very like, there's something wrong with this chick. My gut instincts are telling me there's something off. And she's not wrong. So Ed Mercer essentially comes to the conclusion, as things go on, that this lady is a time traveler from the future. She goes around into various parts of the past, stealing things of historical value, and essentially, it's implied that she stole Amelia Earhart. She stole, she's stolen other things. And with this implication being known, then some of the things she says earlier on is very, it makes more sense. Like how she's like, don't damage the goods when that ship that she called herself crash landing on in order to get the Orville to come and rescue her. So it turns out that she's implanted these devices all over the ship, which enabled her to take it over, which she then uses in order to open a time rift into the future to take the ship. Now, there's a B plot going on in this episode, which is essentially they're trying to teach Isaac the robot humor. And basically, the art of the practical joke. Now, the the main navigator essentially comes to the conclusion, hey, we can totally do this we can totally does a practical joke on Isaac by essentially putting Mr. Potato Head faces on Isaac. Which Isaac's like, this is a practical joke? I mean, okay. And he says, well, now you got to get me back. And the way Isaac does this is actually kind of, I mean, it's kind of black humor. He removes this guy's left leg. Just straight up amputates it. Now this is it's like, no, this is not funny. I'm like, actually it kind of is. Way more funnier than the Mr. Potato Head thing. Because it's black humor, and black humor is funny. So that's the B plot. Why is this important? Because there's a scene at the end where Ed Mercer has an idea. He's like, well, Isaac is the most advanced person on the ship. Maybe his technology can hack into one of these devices so that we can take control of the ship. Unfortunately, they're unable to. Isaac's body is fried when he tries to do this, and everyone thinks he's dead. Turns out he uploads himself into the computer. So basically, the main navigator's like, well, now I can totally, essentially, I need a new leg, and like the doctor's like, his leg's not finished being regrown yet. It's actually kind of funny, really, because he's on crutches, he's got this floppy, gimpy leg going on. It's hilarious, because hilarity is because Schadenfreude is the most basic form of humor. Your pain equals my joy. But that's neither here nor there. Basically, it's at this point that shit gets real. Our main character comes to the realization that Isaac has uploaded himself into the computer and undone the stun lock to their PC to their computer, so they can actually leave this time warp thing that they've been drawn into by Lavara. Doing this nets them some really interesting stories going on here. Mainly, our main character comes to the realization that, Priya's fucking insane. That he essentially gets the ship from out of this situation. And it's at this point that things get awesome, because we have this nice conclusion where Ed's like, well, you lied. You totally lied to me about what you were doing. And you said you liked me, but, I mean, you put my crew in danger, you put me in danger, and you never once apologized for what you did. And he's all like, well, shit, I mean, how is anyone supposed to deal with this? And essentially, he comes up with this conclusion that, like he says, she's like, well, you've got this really advanced technology. What are you going to do about it? And she's like, and he makes this monologue. The captain does, Ed Mercer. He says, well, I could keep this. We could study it, but we can't mess with time. We can't mess with the future. He's like, I can either let this stay the way it is, or I can just completely let things stay the way they are. And if I do that, bad things will happen, and we'll never have met. Like, he's like really philosophical about it. And I mean, this is a fairly deep episode. There's a lot of stuff going on, and I enjoyed it. And they wind up destroying the time rift. So basically, he negates a lot of what's been going on. So, I mean, ultimately, this turns out to be a very good episode. Once again, it was directed by Jonathan Frakes. One of my personal favorites. AKA number one from Star Trek. So essentially, those are the episodes. That's what happened. That's what's been going on. I'm looking forward to more of these episodes, more things going on. So that being said, that's the end of this. I'll give my thoughts on Star Trek Discovery in another video. So yeah.